Yeah, hi, my name is Anish. So my background was helping to run growth and marketing for different startups and companies for about 11 years. Spent 11 years in San Francisco, moved to New York about 4 years ago, and built up an executive recruiting firm. Now our bread and butter is hiring everyone's kind of like executive level marketing, growth, product, analytics, and design teams. We're a team of 14 that's international, and we're excited to throw this panel.
Hi, I'm Yiota Avram. I'm based outside San Francisco. I'm currently a global CMO of Cornershop by Uber, which is a grocery delivery app that started in Chile and Mexico. And since then, we've expanded in Latam, as well as in US and Canada, with a majority stake by Uber. And I'm excited to join the team today. Before that, I was at Ancestry, eBay, PayPal, and then I did start my career in CPGs.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Breuer. I'm the CMO at Buffy. Buffy is a sustainable soft goods company focused on bringing new, better materials into our customers' homes. I joined Buffy in the early days of the company, first leading growth, and then the past year really have headed up our marketing, creative, digital, and merchandising strategies. So really like a lot of the public facing and revenue generating sides of the business. Prior to Buffy, I spent time, I was an early pre-launch member of the team at Ollie, the subscription human grade dog food company. And I came to that space starting at Ampush, one of the real like early FMP players that helped a lot of the early social gaming and first D2C companies scale inside paid social.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like pretty much every D2C company is run by an ex-Ampush person. So your community is pretty strong over there. Cool, we'll start off. So these are questions that were presented when people RSVP'd for this event. We curated the 8 that seemed the most interesting and relevant for this audience, and we'll kind of dig in, but also there is a chat function, so you can feel free as the audience to ask specific questions, and depending on the question, we can do our best to kind of figure out how to address. Yeah, I think this question is sort of pointing to when you're really just starting out and you're just building something from scratch. Either number one, if you're starting a new role, which I think Yiota started one not too long ago, so she had to kind of play this mental path for herself. Or if you're an early company, what is the process for getting started with building your team? How do you go about that? Would love any insight there.
So let me start. I do have experience in in bigger companies, and there it's how do you evaluate the structure and the team, and then take it from there. And then I have experience in a startup that I started from scratch. We started from scratch before I got my latest role. And there, it's when you figure out the product and the market fit. And just from the very, very beginning, I was number 2 or 3 employee. And there, the way I started is get to my network and figure out contractors and consultants that can help us figure out, okay, what's the proposition? What's the, just from very, very scratch, where you do need to figure out the brand and what we offer and the name, but also then figure out again through more cost-effective contracting the performance plan. So that's how I did it there. And then at Cornershop, where it was already a team of 10 and I scaled it to 80 or 70 or 80, is we had a strong CRM team, but then I had to think about, okay, we need stronger performance, we need brand, creative, but I always start with CRM first and then performance, which I combine together under a growth team.
Okay, interesting. And what was the reasoning behind starting with CRM first? Because obviously you need to have a pretty heavy influx of users coming in the first place to have like a healthy retention program. Was it just really looking at the profitability of the program and wanting to scale that up, or that's just where you saw there was a hole? Or love to get any thoughts there.
Well, interesting. Cornershop has been tremendous success in Chile and Mexico, and a lot of the growth was organically. So it depends on the business as well. I mean, obviously, in markets with higher competition, you do need to start with performance and then CRM. So again, you adjust based on the in-market situation and the brand and product fit of the business.
That's awesome. And going back to you mentioning, like when you're just starting off, you kind of are looking for cost-effective contractors, and you mentioned product market fit being the point where you might kind of go do a little bit more. Did you hit a certain point where you said, okay, now is the right time to bring in 1, 2, 3 full-time hires? And if so, how was that process?
Yes. So I think within after 4 months of working with contractors to figure out the proposition, then you start thinking. And again, another thought is also what is your skill set as the leader, and then who do you need first full time to complement your skill set. So for me, it was a performance marketeer who is able to work with me hand in hand and bring it all together.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I like that you brought up the product market fit portion, because we have conversations with a lot of founders who kind of come to us and say, well, hey, our marketing doesn't seem to be really working to the level we want it to work. Let's hire a VP of growth and they should be able to figure it out. And it's a difficult conversation to have those conversations, to say back to a founder, are you sure you're building some shit that people actually want? Because if your marketing isn't working, that might mean your product isn't something that people want either. So, a VP of growth often won't solve that for you. The job of a VP of growth or head of growth or head of marketing isn't to make people buy stuff that they didn't want to buy in the first place, or make people use stuff that they didn't really want to use in the first place. So it's a difficult conversation, but I'm glad you brought up that product market fit, because it's such a difficult thing to product market fit is very much art and science, right? Like no one's really, I guess, brought the definitive science playbook of how do you have product market fit or not. But were there certain instances where you said, okay, maybe we have it here because I see this or this, and therefore let's bring on some full-time hires?
Yes, absolutely. I think when you are number one person, in addition to the founder, first of all, you do need to believe that they have an idea there. Otherwise, I wouldn't work with them. But again, I think that's why for me it's important to have the skill set of both market evaluation, brand positioning, differentiation, in addition to the more typical quantitative growth marketing skill set, because you need both of those skill sets in the beginning when you're figuring out the proposition. So we definitely did a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of data to make sure that we had the right proposition.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. It sounds like it worked out in
yes,
kind of
it did actually. The company is it's allurex.com, so you guys can look at them. It's a great wellness differentiation e-commerce site. So
that's awesome.
Allurex, ALURX. So
what does it sell?
It's wellness based on the conditions that consumers suffer from, whether it's sleep, so different types of wellness needs, and then having the right products for them and the right information.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for running through that. Matt, did you have any? Obviously you've seen Buffy go through different iterations, and you've been there for quite a long time. And if unfamiliar to everyone, I guess you can explain a little bit what Buffy does, because not everyone is based in New York and has seen like all your out of home ads all over the city, like they were plastered about a year ago.
Yeah. So I think for me, right, whether it was when I was in the agency side working with clients or in my roles at Ollie and Buffy, I've always worked in that like very early consumer brand space. And like, what does it look like to really go from zero to those first few milestones? I think when I look at what we did at Buffy in the early days, really for me, it's a reflection of where we place that early focus on what capacity we need to build inside the org. Like, what are the things that we need to actually be getting better at quarter over quarter over quarter? And in those early days, maybe like week over week. I think it's really three areas that you have to cover. It's ad ops, creative, and experience. And I think at the earliest stage, right, if like you're starting your own thing right now and trying to do a little bit of everything, I think like understanding what part in that triangle like you can play independently and where you need to bring in somebody to really have a perspective and point of view how the business can grow through those lenses. Like that's the most important space to cover at the start. I think there was a while there for a few years where the arbitrage in paid social was so strong that you could ignore this stuff and you could just go find someone who knows how to buy media and get that first 100,000, 5,000 customers through the door, and then have plenty of data for people to come in, overhaul the brand, make things look nice while you have got revenue from the start. But I think seeing a company like Buffy that really like rolled up in 2018, I don't think those conditions existed in the same way. And when we looked at the space we were getting into in betting, it was a crowded space full of digitally native brands who'd been around already for close to a decade. And so for us, it became about what are parts of this experience that can be really different. It meant that our media buying strategy was not particularly differentiated, nor did we think it was going to be a sustained advantage for us. What we thought we could build that would keep us in competition with those established brands was creative that resonated with people at a level beyond anyone else in the category. And that would help us make up for the fact that we didn't have as many products because we would just convert better. We focused on experiences that were much closer to like a subscription trial funnel, but for a physical product, because we thought we could just beat people on conversion rate and bid into keywords that we really didn't have any business winning. So there's a lot of that, like where can we build those edges? And I really like that space to focus on because it's an area in the early stage of a brand where when you have those three functions in conversation, looking at results week over week, the things you learn have broad application to basically all of the surfaces of the business. And you're not, chasing like one strategy that's gotten further down the road and then trying to reconcile it with work being done in another area. It like helps keep some of those early pillars really, really tight as we're starting to grow the brand.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Do you have any insights on sort of how you think about kind of full-time versus agency / contractor, considering you grew your career on the agency side and then moved into the role leading growth for multiple popular D2C brands?
Yeah, so I'm like a hardcore in-house person. I'm a hardcore in-house person, and usually bring teams in-house immediately and try to build in-house. My belief about it, I think, is really down to like, what is the information that we don't necessarily learn when we're not the ones doing that work? Like, what's the insight we miss out on? And I think when it comes to channels where you're talking really specifically about media buying strategy, and maybe things are less set, like a lot of the Facebook ecosystem was in 2014, 2015, someone with access to the like hack or trick can like really make their fee. But for us today, I get so much more value out of someone who's overseeing that program, but also understands what all of our channels look like, who also understands what the creative team's looking like, is the person who's always in conversation with them, briefing them on how performance has looked against recent ads. That like, I really want those people in constant contact, and thinking about the business from a broader perspective than just like channel level execution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being more strategic than just pushing the buttons and pulling the levers. That makes a lot of sense. There's a question that's at the end of this deck that I actually thought was pretty fun, because it's something I get asked a lot. So we'll bring it to the front here. What do you think makes a better first hire? And we do get asked this a lot. A growth person or a brand person. You're just kind of kicking off let's say a new D2C company or a new e-com company, and you really don't have much outside the founders. How would you kind of think about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to surprise you in the answer, Anish, because yes, I do come from a branding background. And probably, most brand people, they believe it needs to be brand first, and then, performance, they believe it's performance. I do think the first project, like I said before, needs to determine the brand name, the brand positioning, and have that, heart to heart with the founder, and together figure it out. And that does not need to be a hire. It can be like, there is amazing branding, low cost consultants out there who can come in and determine that. So then the first full-time hire does need to be a performance, because you do need to figure out like, okay, how do I acquire the users? What's the right CAC? How do I optimize? While you start figuring out, as you get traction, what would be the branding plan. So it's performance. And again, different companies have different definitions for growth. Growth for me, like I said, it's acquisition and retention. So it's combining CRM and performance. So it would be first performance and then right after CRM. In most companies, that's how it would be.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, go ahead, Anish.
That was it.
Okay. I was gonna say, I don't think I would say something much different. That I think that first full-time hire has to understand performance. What I get nervous about is like when people make that first hire and they are just like a hardcore media manager, and that like that creates that tension from day one between what is someone trying to do to make performance channels work versus like what was the original brand strategy and positioning, and like lock you in that permanent like no, like let's pull it back this way. So like what I've tried to do is like nest these responsibilities closely inside each other, right? And have people in a place where those brand considerations like are inescapable from their performance considerations, so that we like don't just revisit that tension. I think there was a while where lots of companies were bringing in like director of contents as first hires in the marketing side. And I think that strategy is really, really challenging if that person is also not heavily committed to like learning everything about performance to make the content they're creating succeed. So even if it's someone who ends up playing somewhat of just like a GM role inside the team covering these different functions, they have to understand the performance implications to keep opening up runway for all of the teams and folks that will end up reporting into that marketing structure.
Yeah, that's actually a really great thing to point out, that like I think the modern VP of marketing or CMO is really a GM, right? It's not like maybe a long time ago when your purview was to spend the money and not be responsible at all, or as much in bringing that money back in. You know, when you look at like a lot of the classic commercials that a lot of brands got famous for, you know, anyone from like Gatorade or Apple or anything like that, you know, the job of the CMO was to get that out there, but it was someone else's job to figure out, all right, how much money is that making? Now the VP of marketing or CMO has to be like, well, this is a beautiful campaign, but $500,000 is a lot, and are we actually going to see that come back in? So it is a real shifting of the role that's occurred over the last decade or two. Cool. Let's jump to the next one. Oh, this is a great one. So, you know, when you're building out your team, how do you maintain, number one, a positive and a great culture while also balancing like, hey, everything you do has to perform, you know, which can be a bit of a push and pull. So I'd love to hear any sort of like anecdotes or stories or thoughts there.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a swing. I think from my side, really, there's a few things you can do to like set up that stage successfully, especially in early days. Like I'm really big on not having individual people own channels exclusively. Like as soon as we start to add that second or third hire, I always am trying to aim for at least two people inside the team who could manage a given channel or given function on a day-to-day basis, both to like create, you know, the ability for people to ever take time off, but more importantly, to bring all of the work inside those channels into something that like we can discuss as a team. That I think the teams I had the hardest time working with in the agency world were really disconnected user act teams that were responsible for Facebook and wanted to know why Facebook was better or worse than they thought it was going to be that day. And I found when you bring new folks in and you're having a more holistic conversation about channel performance, it becomes easier to set a really intentional bar around how we want to manage that spend or that channel, that strategy, and depersonalizes the results from anyone's individual contribution. Like those early days, unless you get very lucky, usually are ugly, and you are going to have to make expensive mistakes, and things aren't going to always go right. And I think it can be really toxic quickly when that becomes a sense of like personal identity and success, and not like a collective challenge for us to figure out how we make these things work. So that's my biggest piece when we onboard new people today, even with a little bit more of a built out team. We always start folks with a pretty broad, like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to touch and support on a lot of things. I'm going to understand how the marketing program works. And then I'm going to start to go deeper in a specific area so that I've got that general understanding. I'll be able to pitch in and have conversations about the things my future responsibilities are tied to. And my work can be informed by decisions we're making, things we're learning in other places.
That's super interesting. And I think from our experiences of interviewing a lot of candidates for different companies and roles, people generally want a little bit more breadth and not to be pigeonholed in one or two particular areas. While on the flip side, I often give advice to founders to hire people into very narrow roles. And with the idea, hey, if you have a paid search person, you want someone who's the best paid search person in the world, because that's going to get your paid search program as successful as possible, because they're going to live and die that one channel. But you bring up really good points that, hey, if that channel isn't working out, that person's going to really be feeling not so great about their contributions, and culturally is going to fight other people for those extra dollars, those extra resources, because they're just fighting for their channel. So it's interesting. I think your approach built a better culture.
I think there's also a piece there, right? It's like, for your business, you have to know what you need to be the best at. Like, and in a betting business, I don't think the best version of us is one that's predicated on us being the best consumer brand in the world at like search advertising. It's
Okay.
like there's a pretty fixed set of terms that we're going to compete in. We kind of know what the space is. There's a few different strategies we can employ and test over time, but it's like in that area, if the strategy doesn't work with us being like 92% of the way there, 95% of the way there, there's probably like bigger problems in the business that are going to actually end up eating us. So I think like differentiating what's the thing that we're uniquely good at, or we need to be uniquely good at, and really like over resourcing the expertise there, and then getting people who can cover broader tracks of their program, especially in those early days. It's like where I've tried to balance that stuff out. I think on the consumer brand side, it often means investing more in creative up front, and having that be the area that we can quickly differentiate.
Okay. Yeah. And my next question is where you felt you've been able to add differentiation beyond just channel specific. And I guess you're talking creative is an area you feel like Buffy and you have been able to add some pretty cool differentiation.
100%. I think for us, like we've had those creative and media buying functions working just like in a lot closer collaboration than I have seen at other consumer brands. And that really the model for me was always the way I was seeing media and product teams work together in the app ecosystem, that there was a much clearer understanding of how advertising and new customer acquisition was changing the balance of people in a mobile game and how they were going to monetize. That was really, really productive and would allow us to then spend more and acquire more customers. But that same thinking like rarely extended over to consumer brands, where it was so much more frequent that we would just get dumped a Dropbox folder of things that had been shot 6 months earlier and told to like cut them up and make ads and make something happen. And so for us, we really emphasized, especially in this first 18 months of the business, like how closely can these functions work together to really learn what people respond to and to build that into the visual DNA of the brand. And really, like, I think, continue to evolve our brand around the unique things we were doing that set us apart and that we saw we could drive success against.
Okay. That's super interesting. And honestly, I really liked your answer, and it gave me a lot to think about with my approach of just like, people who like have narrowly lived and died one channel for the last, 5 to 10 years in their career. And what you find is those people don't want to just stick to that one channel forever and live and die their career on that either. So you're offering an opportunity to people to do more, which is great. I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on that, Yoda.
Yeah, I was going to say, I so much agree. It's a huge one for me. And, in some of the bigger tech companies, I found that when I talk to people and also my experience, they focus so much on channel specialization and the spend per channel, and nobody connects the dots across. And then you end up like, okay, let me just optimize search, ROI, for the total company, irrespective of, what's the right strategy, what's the right categories to drive, so then you go for efficiency very blindly in one channel, and then the categories or the verticals or the businesses you want to drive are suffering. So it's very, just looking very blindly, just one channel and just efficiency, no matter where you're getting it. It just doesn't work. So that's why for me, every structure I do, I always give them goals across, so they don't have this silo approach.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, because I've seen it, and it just doesn't work for the total business.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
And then the channels don't talk to each other, or they have different goals, and brand doesn't talk to the growth. Things that for me were new when I moved from CPG marketing to tech. And again, it shouldn't be so separate. It's all together. And how do you connect it to grow the business?
Yeah. And not only that they don't talk, they absolutely hate each other, because
I wouldn't go that far.
Oh, I've definitely worked with brand and creative, brand and performance teams who absolutely hate each other because the dogmas are so different, or seemingly in the organization the dogmas are different because they're traveling into very different directions, and the things they care about are different. And so, yeah, both of you bring up good points on how to keep a culture. So when you are kind of hiring someone in more of a blended role, and pertaining to this particular question, how do you get them started with a role that, potentially some of what their purview is stuff they haven't done really before?
Yeah, I mean, part of it's like is demystifying channels and being honest with like what there is to control. Like I mean, part of my reason to make the move out of channel space was I was young and scared enough to be like, really feels like Facebook wants their computer to optimize these ads and not like me sitting in an office. So I should learn how some other things work too. And I think once you start like peeling back the mystery that a lot of other people talking their own book need to build up about performance in those channels, I think it becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot easier to apply the things you're learning across the broader marketing program. We started Buffy when I joined just with like, let's set a very clear channel agnostic attribution program up that will treat digital and offline channels at least on a level playing field, just so that from the start we could have like conversations about cross-channel performance that weren't immediately about arguing over which team or which person should get credit for a given customer. That we could start to look at like, how do these things need to play together? I just think it like a lot of it comes down to whether or not you're setting up the infrastructure and how people are staffed, what their goal at, what are the metrics that like you're going to highlight in the team meeting and center everyone's attention on, and like do those promote everyone thinking about the bigger picture, or do they really encourage everyone to think about like their own book? I think about the amount of times on the agency side we would do like bake-offs with in-house teams and see, the in-house team we were competing with running an insane percentage of remarketing spend because they were only need to focus on like just beating us in a test, completely irrespective of whether it was a good long-term strategy for the channel, whether it's the right thing for the business to do. And so I've always been like really laser focused on where are we eliminating any chance that we've created perverse incentives for people to pursue things that will make them or their work look really good and be totally disconnected from whether the overall marketing program is succeeding.
I love that.
I love the word demystify. I think that's right on. You know, it's marketing. Yes, there is specialization in channels, but at the end of the day, like it's similar principles. And we have partners to help us too, right? You know, so I think it's important. And from a career progression, you know, I find that so many of my team members love the idea of, hey, what if I learn the other channel, and how do I connect the dots beyond my individual siloed channel? So
Yeah, I think Matt's had a couple of good two-liners. First one, demystifying channels. The second one I liked was perverse incentives. Like you can write a management book called Perverse Incentives about all the crazy things companies do to get people to fight with each other and fight with people externally. Like what a crappy situation. You're running media for a company and your boss comes in and says, hey, compete with this external agency just cause.
Right?
Like
Yeah, exactly.
it's just such a crappy environment to have to deal with. Cool. Thanks for that. Jump to the next one, Grace. This is interesting.
I think there was a question in the chat.
There.
How do do you need the creative strategies in between? And what I would say is that, at least for me, I am coaching and teaching my channel teams to learn creative development and creative strategy. So I'm putting it on them that it's not just the number crunching, it's also engaging and understanding what the creative should be and how do they adjust. So just wanted to call that out.
That's
Literally
a great
could not agree
piece of
more,
feedback.
too. I feel like I'm trying to think about if I've ever been on a panel where in stuff like this, I'm just getting to echo what someone's already said before, because I feel like it's usually an outlier. But my like big expectation for folks on the media side is that like at least the majority of their optimization time is going to be better spent translating insights to help inform creative, whether it's building out the next brief, reporting back on how things are working, than like refreshing and looking at the same numbers in a dashboard again. So we put a big emphasis on folks who are managing and owning channels to just spend a lot of time with their creative counterparts, and that like those really are the hub of our kind of weekly meetings and work cadence.
Yeah, I think the best definition I've heard of even how to think about growth in a simplistic way is accelerated learnings, right? It's not sort of like a nozzle that you turn and just have money come out the other end, right? It's not that easy, and it shouldn't be that easy. It's consistently learning. But when people hear that, they think, okay, you're learning in terms of what bids to use, what experiments to run, what the learnings are that fit neatly into a spreadsheet. But I think one area that people don't think about with that accelerated learnings kind of aspect is people too. Like you're accelerating the knowledge and learning and growth of the team, not just things that fit easily into a spreadsheet. And I think that speaks to a lot of what both of you are saying in terms of what Yiota said, like, okay, help your people that might be a little bit less experienced on the creative side take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about the creative side and get better at it, instead of just thinking everyone is like a closed book the day that they enter your organization. So I think that's great. And I think that's also something that keeps people sticking around for a lot longer, because they're not just doing the same thing over and over and over again for an extremely long period of time. This is a great question. I think one that varies from person to person on how they might approach it. But what do you think makes it? And it could be growth, marketing, anything, team. Quote unquote world class. What are the identifiers when you're interviewing someone? what are you sort of looking out for of like, hey, this is something I'd like to see with this person?
Yes, I can take that because, and Anish knows this, the past 6 months I've been recruiting and hiring on Cornershop. And I sometimes get the pushback that I'm taking too long and I have too high of a bar from our internal recruiting team, rightly so. But it's so important to me when I recruit. I always visualize, can this person get 2 levels above and in a job more than their individual specialized job, which again, connecting the dots to the previous discussion. And a lot of times I don't focus so much on the expertise, the functional skills, although obviously they need to have some basic skill set, but I focus on, are they connecting the dots? Do they show oomph and intellectual curiosity? So I focus more on the soft skills rather than the functional skills, because I learned that, you can always teach the functional skills. And then the last one for me, which I'm amazed how many people don't do this, is people interviewing and not having used the app before. So that's like an immediate, rejection for me, and so many people do that. But so basically they need to show the major curiosity and passion on why they want to work. And they need to show that they connect the dots and think bigger than their individual functional skill set.
I love that. I think that's a great answer right there. Matt, any sort of additional things to add there?
I would answer identically. Yeah, I think it's the exact same.
We agreed too much, Matt, and we didn't.
I know it's a bad. We should have. I should have pulled apart a difference earlier. It's a little too mutually supportive.
And it's so interesting to me that, and someone is asking my transition from CPG to tech, so I can talk very quickly, but I got rejected in so many jobs in the tech startup world because I didn't know how to do the actual bidding myself, in performance. And I just wish we could coach the founders that anybody can do the bidding, it's the connecting the dots, having a good consumer sense, on a proposition, knowing how to do math. So again, I just wish, I wish that more founders, thought that way. And then the question about the transition from CPG to tech, but we can take that later, Anish. I don't want to.
Yeah, I can touch upon a few things that I look for as we're interviewing people. One is transparency. There's a lot of marketers that you'll interview, obviously our firm interviews marketers all day. So we talk to a lot of people, and I want to see the human. I want to see the real story behind whatever happened, not your sort of templated, made for press kind of story. What worked, what didn't work. When I ask about things that didn't actually, I ask like, okay, what are some things that maybe didn't work out? And what, don't try to turn that into, a positive, like that classic, like, what's your biggest weakness question? Don't say, I just work too hard and I care too much. Like I don't want to hear like some bullshit story that you've created. I want to know, oh, hey, this was a giant failure that we worked on. And then after that, I want to learn something, the best interviews that I have are not people who just run through their resume like a diary, like just, oh, I was here, I did this, then I was here, then I did this, then I was here, then I did this. That's really not that impressive or interesting. What I want to hear is, okay, when I was at this last company, we took a giant swing right here and completely missed. And then I looked back on, why did we miss on this swing? Well, it's because this, and this. Then I took that learning, and then we rotated that into this, and this. And, if you've had like a decent tenure anywhere, there's going to be such an iterative cycle of learning, success, lack of success, experimentation, or at least I would hope there is. Otherwise, you probably weren't very involved in anything. But you know, I want to walk away being like, oh wow, when that particular company that I've heard so much about, it's really interesting that this was something that didn't work, which I thought would have worked, or this was a big thing that worked for them. Like, wow, okay, that's someone I really want to have working for us. That's someone who I'd really want to have working for one of our clients, because they're going to walk in and teach someone something. So yeah, I'd say transparency, and, you know, make the interviewer learn something. You know, I think back to a recent product manager I interviewed from Spotify, and he basically taught me about this whole new version of experimentation that I knew nothing about, that they'd sort of like tried at Spotify, didn't think it was going to work, and then it really did well. And it was a term I'd never heard of, and I was just blown away. I was like, this guy's amazing. And, you know, I introduced him around to a bunch of founders who I thought he could be really great for, because he taught me something. So, you know, try to walk in showing your learnings and showing some level of honesty and transparency as a badge. You know, we all have failures. Don't hide them. You know, wear them proudly. Jump into the next one. This is interesting. Maybe Yiota has a little bit more experience with kind of organizations that scale above 50 people, but I'm not sure if Matt, if you also have some of that experience as well. But you know, what were some interesting pushes and pulls that occurred when that happens? You know, the culture changes from everyone knowing what everyone's working on to, okay, you're not just going to walk into the office and know what's going on because everyone is sitting around, you know, 2 or 3 long tables. How do you bridge that gap?
So for me, definitely I have that experience both at Ancestry and Cornershop now, where they went from 200 people or 300 to 2,000 and more, you know, within a year. And I just think it's driven by the leadership, you know, whether it's the founders and leaders like us, you know, like you can still feel like a family, even though you're a bigger company. And that's what I'm finding. I mean, I love Cornershop, and I just love the culture, and you know, it's similar principles, right? Of how do you work together? How do you build on each other's thoughts? So you know, I don't know, maybe because that's the way I lead, and I also look for companies that drive that value of you know, just working very closely together. So you know, yes, there is some pushback as you get bigger, you know, on processes, on cadences, which you need in order to scale, right? So it's not sitting around the table anymore all the time, you know, and you need to, but definitely one learning for me is that, yes, you can still scale, but you don't necessarily need to incorporate bureaucracy, right? So what's the minimum? What's the minimum of cadences that you need to organize the team, but at the same time feel like a startup-y and a family? And I love that balance, and that's where my expertise comes, right? Like that scaling. And then what do you need to do, and how do you make sure you build on what it's done, you know, through the first few years? So I think it can be done,
awesome.
and it's fun.
Are there any anecdotes or sort of things that you've incorporated that allowed people to feel a little bit closer together, even if the teams were becoming gigantic?
Well, for me, it's been even more challenging, right? Because I joined during COVID. So I haven't, and my team is all over LATAM and Canada and outside San Francisco. So I can't wait to meet everyone in person. But yeah, I mean, definitely lots of bonding. I mean, at Ancestry, I was managing international, and you know, it's very important. Like, first of all, help the teams understand why you need some cadences as you scale, but also make sure they fully believe that you appreciate the way they were working before. So it's just finding that balance. And then at Ancestry, it was very much, okay, how do we make this a global organization versus more US centric, right? So it depends on the organization, but I just find that it's driven by leadership. And that's why leaders who have a combination of startup and bigger company, you need to have both experiences in order to be able to do this, I think.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. Matt, did you want to dig into anything there? Or?
Oh no, I'm woefully unqualified.
Okay.
No, I'm one touch.
Any consistent questions that you like to ask across different interviews? You know, not even necessarily related to one particular role versus another, but that you see consistently gives you some insight into what you're looking for or not looking for out of a candidate?
I really like to ask people about places in their life where they use data outside of work. Whether it is like a more senior hire or whether it's like an entry-level role. I think my favorite candidates over the years have all been people who have not known what to do with the question, struggled to answer at first, and then start to like talk about their giant iTunes library that they have organized, and they like to see what they listen to, so they have it all sorted and have it's like I think it very quickly reveals to me people who like naturally develop habits to present information or look at things in a thoughtful way, and like gives me some sense for what people will do if they're not provided structure to solve a problem, and needing like I don't have the time to be involved in every single channel, everything we're doing, how we're executing it and looking at it. You like need to be able to build trust with folks that they're going to be able to come back with those frameworks and you can improve upon them together, but that their instincts are going to have them start in the right place. And I've always found it's a really useful screen for me on that front.
For me, I check if they can think on their feet, right? So I will ask questions that they don't expect on a business, on our business. That's why, asking them about what 3 specific things they would do to change on our app, and when they say, oh, I haven't done the app, haven't downloaded the app, then, So, and then as a candidate, definitely, I did not like case studies, but I do think they work. Candidates that I screened from interviews, and then we gave them a case study, which again, it doesn't need to be very complicated. You give them some numbers and you give them a strategic question and they come and present. And you realize when you ask questions that they don't expect on their presentation, and again, they cannot think on their feet enough for me. And again, as I evaluate, can I get them 2 levels above as I coach them? I find that they work. And like I said, intellectual curiosity and oomph, are they driving? Do they want to learn?
Makes sense. Yeah, I'd say just a very simple one I ask people is, tell me what worked at a company you worked at and tell me what didn't. And I know that puts certain people in an uncomfortable situation because they're like, oh, I can't tell you the secrets of this or that. But if they can't really create a storyline to at least tell me what worked and what didn't work, it's hard for me to really digest if they even understood it themselves or whether they were just locked into executing on whatever their narrow search is. I want I want deep learnings. So yeah, I don't ask very complicated questions. And Yoda, I don't think I'll ever pass any one of your interviews if you're kind of throwing me off like left or right consistently, but it sounds fun to try. Cool. I think we have time for just this one. Any interesting things that have been in the last year or so with regard to growth that make a good anecdote in terms of learnings? Yes, like stuff that worked, didn't work, anything like that, or maybe even shifts that you've been noticing in the last year or so?
Well, I mean, I guess I can answer. Grocery delivery obviously, has been growing. Part of it by the very sad COVID situation, but part of it because people are looking for convenient way to drive groceries. So yeah, I mean, that's what I had to learn the past 7 months, like understand better the category, what are people looking for, and how do we make their life easier and better. And then to your point, how do we combine the different marketing channels to drive that growth? And it has been a very good experience to learn from that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think without revealing too much under the hood, I think the value of the like lower quality cheap click that still has some real intent behind it has never been higher.
It's 1 o'clock.
That there's a real opportunity, and I think this still remains true in places like social, to just differentiate funnels by being able to capture a little bit of interest, a little bit broader interest than your competition is, and that you can start to speak to some people who are never going to end up inside the same expensive search or remarketing ecosystem that a lot of your customer base is in, but that it lets you kind of expand out into slightly further afield demographic groups. I think we focus a lot on where can we just increase that top of funnel in a as efficient as possible way, without like just throwing in totally new channels or traffic that we know nothing about and needing to wait 6 months to see how it functions.
That's really cool. You mean every one of your ad sets isn't called Affluent Millennial? And you're not just throwing all your dollars toward that. I still hear that term and makes me want to vomit. So I'm glad you're actually targeting someone other than that. And we are at time. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thanks to our panelists, Yiota and Matt. They, feel free to reach out to myself. I'll put my email address here. And yeah, again, thanks a lot, everyone.